Today in the third half, I'm delighted to be joined by James Walker, now Chief Administrative Officer at DXC, and someone with one of the most unusual career arcs in enterprise tech, from live music and Disney, to global banking, IBM Cloud, and running operations at serious scale. I don't know why I always chuckle when I say Disney. It sounds kind of brilliant when you say it in a Scottish accent. We talk about the future of work, why trust is harder in a remote world, why mentoring still matters, and why well-being isn't a perk. It's a product of how organisations are actually run. There's also a proper geek out on AI and coding, a frank chat about tough decisions and being humane, and then we finish where all serious leadership conversations should end: music and cheese. Enjoy. James Walker, happy January. Welcome to the third half.
God, how are you?
I'm very good, man. Very good.
Long time no see, man.
Is it what, about a year maybe?
Yeah.
Do you have, just before, do you have this January feeling like at the moment? You know,
What do you mean by January feeling?
Well, it's like everybody kind of is a little bit, you know, like post Christmas, everyone going to the gym, fridge full of cheese that nobody wants to look at.
Yeah, we got a fridge full of cheese.
Fridge full of cheese. Everybody's doing dry January, getting back to work and going, ugh. Or are you kind of this guy?
I don't know. I kind of like it. I've always been I've always had this belief in kind of new beginnings, and I always used to love sort of September because it's like the start of the new school year, and I always think, like, I'll take the feedback from my teachers. You know, chronic underperformer. You know, could do better. This is the year that I'm going to be really organized, and I'm going to be really neat with all of my homework and organize all my files and get my revision schedule worked out, you know. And then it kind of would fall apart within a couple of weeks. And then, you know, you come back in and think, well, it's a new year. The year's got a different number on it. Like it's a new beginning. So January, yep, I'm gonna do all of this stuff, and you know, it kind of falls apart by about February. So I'm still in I'm still in that kind of buzz of, you know, we've come back. We had a great break over Christmas. You know, saw the family, and now I'm ready to get back to work and do stuff. And
so you're
I've got all my Christmas presents. My wife bought me a guitar for Christmas, and so I've been trying to do like an hour of guitar practice every day. You know, so you know these things haven't yet faded for me.
Are you? So you're still that 14-year-old that sort of like skips down the corridor and the saying, "Yippee! It's January."
Yeah,
and everybody else is going, "Oh bloody hell!" And if I dialed your mother at the moment, you know, and she'd say, "Yeah," it usually lasts till about the 17th.
Yeah, something
say,
like that.
No, just keep it going.
If my mother's getting on a bit,
but yeah,
she probably thinks so. She probably thinks I'm still at school.
Your mum's probably a bit like my mum, you know. Whenever anybody says to my mum, "What does your Scot do?" and she says, "Oh, I don't know. He just works in London." Anyway, welcome to the third half. Delighted you could join me because I know how busy you are. And listen, what I tend to do is I throw the mic over to you for the first couple of minutes to my guests and say, for the interest of our listeners, just give me a kind of 30 seconds to a minute to a couple of minutes. People tend to take 5, about your career, your background, and introduce yourself to our audience, listeners, and viewers.
Sure. Yeah. So James Walker, and we've known each other, I think, is it like 30 years or something? God,
and we still dress.
We don't even look that old, do we? We were saying, we were having a little chat before you pressed record, actually, that is there a kind of a look like middle-aged bald men with beards and black glasses, and I just took my puffer off because I thought it was too weird both sitting here in black puffers. So I got my kind of, you know, tech bro look of quarter zip, and the Patagonia puffers just been chucked on the floor. But
Carhartt.
Carhartt. Oh, really? Yeah.
Down with the kids, man.
Yeah, I know. But I don't know. I'm not a follower of fashion. I mean, it's kind of, you know, obviously a Charles Tyrrell quarter zip and a Patagonia puffer is not at all following the herd here, right? But getting back to career. So I started out like I went to university just at the very end of the 80s, and then I'd kind of done some stuff in the music industry beforehand. When I was a kid, I liked I like building amps and stuff. I was in a couple of bands where I was a terrible musician, and I found what my niche was. I was pretty good at electronics, and nobody had any money, so I used to build speaker cabs and amps and stuff, and then
Yeah.
rent them out, and so I did that kind of thing. And then I got a job working for a live music production company, and I did that for a year before I went to university. But left university, worked for my dad's IT company for a while, and where I was a computer programmer, and that got me a job at the Walt Disney Company, working for Walt Disney Filmed Entertainment, IT, and that was loads of fun. Yeah, um, it was it was like it was right at the renaissance of Disney, and it was a great time to be there. We were making a lot of live action movies at the time. So Pretty Woman, Hollywood Pictures, Touchstone, Buena Vista, bought Miramax. So I started out as a programmer working on some movie distribution platforms, and I was doing some video compression type technologies back in the early days of non-linear editing.
Mm.
And then after a few years, I'd got married. We had our first child on the way, and the movie industry is great fun to work in, but the hours are kind of brutal. It's very sociable. There's a lot of kind of partying and premieres and all the rest of it, and which is great when you're single and in your 20s, but not so great when you're married and you've got a baby on the way. So um agreed with my wife I should get a grown-up job, so I went to work for JP Morgan, and running networks actually for them. So when I worked for JP Morgan, that's when I met you, because in about 97, I think it was, we got outsourced to a company called CSC, Computer
Yeah.
Sciences Corporation, like a big outsourcing transaction. I had loads of fun. That was a fabulous job. We pitched up at CSC, and they said, kind of, what do you want to do? Like, we've got all these accounts. This was the heyday of outsourcing. We've got all these new customers we're taking on. Do you want to go stay on JP Morgan? Do you want to run old mutuals, IT? Do you want to work in business development? I think you were on the Deutsche Bank account at the time.
Schroders.
Like
Schroders,
yeah. So it was great fun, and the company it was just a fabulous company. I mean, but then 2005, I think it was. I ran into a guy called David Riley, who was the CTO at Credit Suisse. He said, "Come work for Credit Suisse." Went over to Credit Suisse, and I ran a few things there. Like I ran like networks and some core infrastructure, and then like IT procurement. And I ended up actually running bank-wide strategy and change for some reason. I don't know why. But that was loads of fun, and David was just the most amazing mentor. And I mean, I just about stuck it out at Morgan Stanley for a couple of years before I went over to Bank of America, and I ran like procurement for tech and ops. And I started off in procurement, but I ran architecture for a while, and then ended up running networks. And and that was loads of fun. We built like a giant optical backbone, rebuilt all the data center networks, did loads of automation, rolled out SD-WAN. SD-WAN, I think the biggest SD-WAN network in the world at the time, 5,000 branches. The 5,000 locations rather. The lots of kind of technology change at the time that was going on. AI was was a kind of a twinkle in people's eye, but these the SD, software defined, these sort of controller based architectures for tech infrastructure were getting really, really, really interesting. But we weren't doing much stuff in cloud, and I thought, really, I've got to get more au fait with the cloud business. And another friend of mine, ex Bank of America, in fact, he sold me a big outsourcing deal when I was at Credit Suisse. A guy called Howard Bovell was running IBM Cloud, and he said, "Why don't you come over to IBM Cloud?" And I'd been an economist at university, and I'd always had an interest in economics, kind of academically. And so he said, why don't you come run economics for IBM Cloud? So I went over I think I started out as VP of strategy and transformation, but I ended up running economics. And that was really interesting. We were looking at like how do the cloud providers actually make money, and how do companies save money in the cloud, and what are the economics of it? And the I think my conclusion from that was unless you can operate at hyperscale, you can't make money. Howard went over to DXC, and DXC, interestingly, was the merger. It was about 8 years ago between CSC, a company that both of us used to work for, and what was HP Enterprise Services, which was the spin out of HP, which was really formed from a company called EDS, Electronic Data Systems, Ross Perot's outsourcing business. So again, a giant company, and had said, "Why don't you come over and help me out?" And I interviewed with the CEO, Ralph Fernandez, and he said, "Why don't you come be the chief admin officer for the company and help me run the company?" And so I've never been a kind of C-level exec before, and but I've been kind of a CIO, CTO type function. Run IT, I run procurement. I run operations, but I've never done all three at the same time. We're a big company, 130,000 people in 70 odd countries. Big IT sub, one of the biggest independent IT services firms in the world. So I'm
And
having a lot of fun.
amazing. I will go back to the start of this because it's fascinating. And you still cut code.
I do. I love writing code. I just love it.
So
And
I remember I remember coming into your office. We hadn't seen each other for about 10 years, and I came in to see you last year. And he said, "Oh, hi Scott, how you doing?" And he said, "Anyway, let me just tell you about this code I've just written." And I thought, of all the reintroductions, it was not going to be listening to you about how you'd written code, and it was about planning your next holiday. Do you remember?
vaguely, what the code I'd written.
Yeah, you said, "I've
Oh,
written this
yeah.
brilliant code about how to play," and then you spent about the first 20 minutes chatting about how you write code every day. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I say I write code, it's like it's kind of blows my mind, right? Because if you think it's only what 3 years since ChatGPT came out,
Yeah.
and the the kind of coding assistants at the time were really tab completion. The kind of the paradigm of writing code was still like you write the code, but you press tab and it will complete the code. And then kind of Claude Code came out as a side project, which was this kind of IDE-less, what we would describe as a TUI, a terminal user environment. So it's not graphics. It's not like you can't wiggle your mouse in it and copy and paste. It looks like a old school BT 220 terminal that you type stuff in,
Green
and you
screen.
type into Claude Code. If I'm sure plenty of your viewers, listeners, use Claude Code in these kind of headless development, agentic development environments. But you type stuff in like, write me a program that does this, and you don't write the code anymore. It goes up. You don't even see the code being written. It just says, right, here are the files. Do you want me to run it and test it? And around the same time, all these what they call coding environments started spinning up, like Replit, V0, Lovable, and so on. Where you could go on just on your phone or on a web browser, and you just type into a chatbot, make me an application that, I don't know, so I can store all my recipes or something, right? And it'll just go and it'll whir and it'll charge you $20 a tokens or something, and then you have an app. For anybody that started out the hard way, I think like the hard craft of writing C in the early 90s, of like this arcane syntax that you get like something in like a curly bracket in slightly the wrong place or something, like nothing would work, and you'd have 2 days of debugging it while your boss was mad with you. Now you just type something in, and these agents spin up, and 5,000 lines of code get written. It's mind blowing.
But I think we're going back in time a little bit because I think there's some goodness in this because my son, who did a history undergraduate degree and then went on to do international relations and now works in the public sector, and I remember him turning around to me about 8 or 9 years ago or something like that and saying, "Oh, I'm doing a course on coding and writing code," and I thought, it just feels so far removed from what you were doing. And what came to pass was it felt like everybody was doing it. So I think that we lost that skill set somewhere in the last 20 years where fewer and fewer people wanted to understand how to code or what coding was. And then it sort of came back into fashion a little bit. And you've kind of taken it through, like that's how you started. Now, I'm not going to say it's how you're finishing, but you still keep doing it, which is great. People understand systems and understand code and understand technology better by doing that.
but it's much. I think it's because the thing that AI has given us, and when I'm referring to AI, I really mean Gen AI, large language
Yeah.
models, is it's it's reduced the barrier to creativity. So
Mm.
the I when I talk about kind of AI coding, agentic coding, it's I make a distinction between semantics and syntax. And the semantics are kind of, what does something do, and what do you want it to do? And the syntax is the language that you write in order to get that thing done. So you might have an idea, and hey, I've got my application, that little holiday thing was saying, I just wanted to be able to drop the flight details and the hotel details from the invoice from the travel company. I just wanted to drop it into an app and have the app make me a personalized travel magazine. I remember it now. It
Yeah.
was a bit of fun. So it just spat up some agents that went off and found out what are all the things to do in the city? Are there any events on? I could set up a persona. My wife likes going to art galleries. I like live music. Make us an itinerary that we'll both enjoy. Figure out where the restaurants are, where the hot restaurants are, or whatever. Go book the restaurants and buy my museum tickets, and then make me a magazine that looks like a Condé Nast Traveler, but personalized to my exact trip. And that was loads of fun because you can I was writing all these different agents that you need a travel book, the kind of the booking agent that will go online and book you a restaurant or whatever, and you need a reviewer agent that will trawl through these kind of restaurant reviews, and you need another agent that goes and on Ticketmaster or whatever and figures out what all the gigs in the town
You,
are.
you,
So it's
you,
just,
you
but I
need,
didn't write any code. That's the thing. I didn't have to know how to sit there and write print F,
yeah.
open double quote,
And test it for a week, as you say.
and then
And
test it for a week. I
but you
don't.
must have that. I tell you what, your wife's a lot braver than mine, because I just have that moment of kind of turning up at the restaurant and saying, Mr. Walker or Mr. Hamilton. Nah, never heard of you.
Oh, look, I'm not a completer finisher, mate. It's like the 80 to 90% of the code gets written in the dev environment, but when it comes to actually push to deploy into production, it was yeah, I'll do that next week, right?
Yeah. Back to the outsourcing and get somebody else
Yeah.
to do it. So listen, but see if we go right back. I mean, an economist. I didn't know you studied economics, and then you went creative. Writing music, making music in bands, rigor, tour, and stuff like that, and then to Disney, and then out to corporate. And I'm fascinated by this because I think that creative piece, and then how you take that and that thinking and those skills and apply it in the work environment is kind of fascinating, and gives people a kind of really different edge from perhaps people that have just been born, brought up, worked in large enterprise technology all their lives. Do you feel that helped you stand out a little bit in terms of your career
I
progression?
think so, because I mean it kind of, I was lucky that it sort of made me more interesting than I actually am.
Mm.
So people are always interested, right? Oh yeah, you worked in the movie industry. Oh, tell me, did you meet anybody famous? So
Well, I
like
do
the
remember. I think I probably asked you that the first time we met, and I said, "What did you do before you joined JP Morgan?" You said, "I worked for Disney," and I said, "Really? Did you?" Did you know really? And it's like, no, no,
were
no,
you in
no.
the theme park? Do you wear a costume?
Yeah, yeah,
Whatever.
yeah.
The I think so. There's a few things that I learned. I mean, one is the thing. One of the things I remember taking away from the short time I spent in the music industry is um, a lot of people are pretty unpleasant. I grew up in a pretty sheltered kind of middle class world and beautiful town in Lincolnshire, Stamford, which I think is his town in England, if not the world. I had a happy childhood and went to a great school, and nothing had gone wrong in my life, if you know what I mean. I hadn't encountered people who were, criminals who'd rip you off and,
Mm.
involved in drugs and like anything that wasn't nailed down would get stolen. And people were always out to rip you off, and the promoters wouldn't pay. And, it was kind of, that opened my eyes up. So I became a little bit more cynical about people. And then working at Disney, you learned about, it was an incredible time, and it was this massive expansion of, with pay TV. Satellite was being launched in the UK. The home video market was exploding. Like I said, it was the renaissance of Disney. It was a great time to work there. but you learn like the people there were storytellers, and it was a company that its whole basis was like, how do you tell a story, and how do you join things together, and never let anybody look behind the curtain. I remember we were on like I don't know, it's like an analyst, an earnings call or something with Mike Eisner uh, and I think Frank Wells, and Frank sadly died. He was the COO. Frank sadly died in a helicopter accident, in the early 90s. And I think one of the analysts asked something like, oh, if Mickey Mouse is a real creature, how come he's in all of the theme parks around the world at the same time? And I think Frank Wells, sort of went forward and said, in all seriousness, this is like a conference with the analysts. It's like, yeah, he has a special plane that runs at hypersonic speed, so he can go to multiple places simultaneously. It's like, never let anybody look behind the curtain here. And one of the takeaways, and I've found it absolutely invaluable in my career, was the ability to tell a story, and human beings as natural storytellers. I mean, before we knew how to write, there was an oral tradition of history and storytelling. It's like, where were the woolly mammoths that you could go and hunt? If you had a story of like, how you crossed over the mountains and swam across the river or whatever, and found the woolly mammoths. It was like, that was kind of how people remembered, and how people made mental maps to things, and I think it's in our DNA. And if you can craft a story, I mean, there's different people like respond to different things. My boss at the moment is the chief financial officer, and he responds incredibly well to data, as you'd expect, and fact, and less well to words and stories. But you talk to other folks, like a customer, like people in a markets organization. They want to know how to be able to kind of craft a story about the value that we can bring to a customer. If you're talking to your team, you have to be able to explain to a team, like, what's our strategy? Where are we going? What's your role in that? Like, we're all part of this kind of band of brothers and sisters that are, marching to a common purpose, and we've got to slay some dragons, and the work that you do is important, and your role is meaningful and impactful. And how do people connect the dots with that? And for me, that's always been storytelling. And Disney was just an amazing kind of training ground for that.
So interesting, and I want to come on and talk about this because there's a real strong people aspect in here. And if we talk about the future of work, and we've touched on this a little bit, right? Touched on productivity tools, how people code AI, and we've talked about AI, hybrid models. I think there's a lot less honest discussion about trust and how people actually experience work, especially in big organizations. So from where you sit, how do you see future of work evolving in large global organizations? Because you've spent most of your life in large global organizations.
Yeah.
And particularly about trust, productivity, and also I want to come on and talk about well-being, because I know that this is something that's very, very close to your heart as well.
I don't know. I think about it a lot, Scott, because when we grew up, when we entered the workforce, work was somewhere you went to as well as something that you did. And the leaders in the firms that we worked for were kind of very generous with their time, and they were very visible. It's kind of, if you wanted to, if the old, I don't think it applies necessarily now, but the adage when when I started work is like, if you want to get a one-on-one with the CEO or like a C-suite executive, just make sure you're the first person in the office in the morning and go to the coffee machine, because the senior guys are in at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and they're going to get a cup of coffee. And if you're hanging around by the coffee machine, they're going to say, "Hey, how are you? Haven't seen you. What are you doing?" And I know a lot of people that got pretty decent jobs, like side projects or pet projects for a senior leader that elevated them up very quickly through the organization because they got exposure. And they also taught you how to behave. It wouldn't be like an HR disciplinary, you get fired because you've put an extra bottle of wine on your expenses or something, somebody would take you aside and say, right, this is not the way you behave in the workplace, right? Like, it was, you were properly mentored, and you got guidance, and you were taught about resilience, and that, you know, you've got to be an adult, take responsibility for what you do. Like your mum and dad aren't there to save you when you start working, and you have to show up every day, and you have to have the grit to get through adversity. And now I think, like, where is that for people entering the workforce? And we're trying to get everybody back in the office, and people are moaning like anything. And I hear to both sides of the story. That I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it home today, but I generally go in every day, and I think, like, yeah, I understand that, but I understand, maybe you're trying to juggle childcare or something else, and I don't like to commute because what a waste of time, blah blah blah. But I think, like, there's a whole generation of kids that, like, had their university careers ruined by COVID, that are in the workforce now, and work for them is sitting with a laptop in their parents' back room because they can't afford their own flat because housing's too expensive, typing away on a little keyboard, looking at a little tiny screen with their headphones on or something. Like that's not a life. That's not work. Wait, who's mentoring them? How do they get visibility? How does talent get spotted? Like, how do you give people a break? There's unconventional people in every organization, and it's the unconventional people that drive change. But if in a normal mode of kind of operation of a company, you'd do a performance appraisal every 6 months, and you got to make sure you get your line manager's permission before you speak to somebody senior or something else. And then what is the venue that you go talk to somebody senior who's also working remote or something else? It's like what kind of a life is that? This is, I'm just, the other thing that depresses me is this sort of lack of resilience as well, like little setbacks that seem to really derail people. And you mentioned kind of well-being, mental health, and things like, well-being and mental health for me, the first port of call is, have a job that you enjoy doing in a firm, around people that support you, where you can be successful. Because work is your identity. It's what you spend most of your time doing. It's your livelihood. It's and there's a social responsibility, I think, for for employers as well as employees to sit on both sides of that transaction. You've got to you as an employee have to work hard. You have to contribute. You have to fight your way through setbacks, and you as an employer need to help people get through that, and that means visibility and mentorship and leadership and commitment to people. And it just feels like the world of work today, those are quite fragile and brittle concepts. And that really worries me, Scott. It's because I'm so grateful and thankful for the amazing people that helped me in my career, and I've had a great career because of other people, not because of really my own capability. Right?
Yeah, well, I think you hide your light under a bushel, as they say. But I worry about trust. I don't know how we can create trusting relationships, between employees, between leaderships, between subordinates, across teams and with clients, when everything feels so remote. Like I think you establish trust by meeting people, by delivering to people, by understanding people. And I think if we lose that, I just don't know how trust exists in this kind of future of work.
No, it's a really good point, because how do you, we both come from an area of, you build trust by building a personal relationship, and that means breaking bread. It means sitting down with somebody. It means an informal conversation. It means talking about, getting to know somebody as a person, and it's much harder to betray the trust of somebody you see as a human being versus somebody that's just like a faceless inbox or something.
Yeah.
Because it becomes personal at that point, and it's kind of, again, if in a kind of in a remote world, it always makes me, people, this concept of like meeting agendas and everything else always drives me nuts. Where people are like, oh yeah, we need a meeting agenda and we need to stick to time and we get, and it's kind of like we need to make it actionable and all this stuff. And you can get all these like self-help books on, effective meeting management or something, whatever. I think that's all bullshit, right? It's like if you've got some kind of a transactional meeting where, that's the only way of getting that transaction done. That works well. And, I don't know, board meeting, and, some formal committee, risk management, where you have to minute stuff and so on. But a lot of that work could get done over kind of email or IM or, through process automation, if you're using, kind of Salesforce or ServiceNow, these kind of workflow tools to get people sign off on stuff. And there has to be some kind of a place in the meeting. Where's the venue for me to get to know you? Oh, you've got kids, or your mother's got Alzheimer's or something, and so that's the reason why you couldn't work late or over the weekend on this important project is you actually have some other commitments in your life, right? I'm not like, where do I find those things out about you? Where do I understand who you are as a human being, and you understand who I am as a human being? And that for me is the foundation of trust. Is the point at which you recognize I'm an optimist. That I sincerely believe that the vast majority of people just want to do a good job. They want to be good people. They see themselves as good people. Most interpersonal problems and most betrayals of trust come down to a lack of communication or lack of empathy.
And so that's fascinating. And your work as a mental health ally, you actually do proper work in this space as opposed to just talk about it. Balancing that with big roles and really tough decisions that you have to make operationally gives you a kind of deep insight. Actually, how do you balance off those two things and instill that, kind of people oriented? We're on a journey, with actually there's some really tough decisions here we have to make operationally about how we run the business, both whether it was client side or supply side.
There's no answer to that. I think, you've got to. If your starting point is you're trying to be a good person and you're trying to do the right thing, but the right thing is a kind of a hierarchy. There's like, you can't satisfy and you can't keep everybody happy all of the time. My first responsibility as an employee is to serve the long-term needs of our shareholders. People talk about like the stakeholder economy or stakeholder management. I'm not a believer in it, right? I think you end up with this kind of ridiculous fudge of trying to keep everybody happy and pandering to interests. I think about the people that work for our company. We have 130,000 employees, so there's at least 200,000 people dependent on a paycheck that we produce, and we have a responsibility to stay in business. Right? We have to make sure that we serve the needs of our customers, and that means sometimes making really, really hard decisions. If you lose a big customer, if you have a revenue shortfall, if you have, and most of my time on the customer side has been in IT and going through waves of technology innovation that effectively make people's work redundant. All the kind of where it's been automation. We were only the first wave of the .com boom. Then there's cloud. There's automation. Then AI, ML. Now kind of Gen AI and the various automation waves. A lot of the work that we've had to do in our careers is going to companies and saying, I can run this business process for you at half the cost because I can take all of your people out and I can replace them with machines. And that's been and that's human history, right? Every wave of the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, and that work is really hard. I still feel, if I have to lay somebody off, and I have to lay people off now, I've been working for nearly 40 years, and it's just doesn't get any easier.
Yeah.
Every single one is just as horrible as the last one. But there's plenty of people that, I've had a part company with in the past because they've been a bad fit or because the work's gone away, that I've re-employed at some point in the future, and they've stayed friends and I've stayed in touch with them because, hey, guess what? Something else that's come up is a better
Yeah.
fit.
Yeah.
You've just got to. It's just about being a human being. Being humane, being a real person, not some kind of corporate machine. Like people who delegate layoffs to some email bot or HR or something. It's just a terrible way of treating people.
Yes. Disillusionment. Okay. I want to kind of move on a little bit and talk to you about sustainability, because it's one of the big things that I'm bringing out here in the podcast. Where do you see operational efficiency? Because we've talked about that a lot in this, and you've been at the centre of that across many organisations. How do you see that sitting with the kind of sustainability agenda, whether it clashes, complements, and drives meaningful
Well,
change?
define what you mean by sustainability, first of all.
So if I look at sustainability, if I look at environmental issues, if I look, people issues is a big part of this as well. Like when I look at the constant throwing away of old technologies, we talk about technical debt, whether it's a hindrance or is it an asset or is it an opportunity. There has been this chase for the majority of our lives of upgrading and bringing in the next best thing. Is that the best use of our assets? Do we sweat assets well enough? And how do we kind of like make sure that we leverage the investment that we are making and our clients are making to best effect?
Well, as I said before, I'm an optimist, and I believe in kindness. I believe in kindness to people, but I believe in kindness to our world as well. Kindness to our environment. I don't believe the doom mongers, and I think we've created again a generation of kids that are terrified that we're all going to burst into flames or something. We're going to drive all living creatures to extinction, which is not the case. There's a great website called Our World in Data. Like the data tells the story every time. We haven't figured out tsunamis, which they're now the biggest natural disaster that kills people. But it's not like in the 80s where we're watching like starving people in Africa and on the television every night. And it's kind of and that is because of science. That's because of genetically engineering crops which can survive drought. That's because we have electronic systems that can, detect and predict extreme weather patterns, that we've got, helicopters that can rescue people, and we've got a medical system with drugs and capacity and armies that have heavy lift capabilities. I believe in science, and I believe that the relentless and continual elevation of the human condition that is driven by science and technology will continue. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be kind to the world that we live in. And I hate litter. One of my pet hates is litter. My wife and I often we live out in the country on a little farm, and the amount of litter that we get in our lane now is in the last 10 years is unbelievable. It's like it's like the verges are strewn with plastic bottles and coffee cups and takeaway cartons. I can't believe it. And we go out and take, like at the weekend, we go pick up a bag of litter. Maybe this goes back to the trust thing. So like, we've gone from a high trust to a low trust society, and the sort of tragedy of the commons. Of people mistreating the planet because there's no you could say they don't feel a responsibility to behave in a humane way. But it's like, I think if sustainability for me is sustaining technological progress, because we enjoyed that, and the reason why we're here and we're wealthy and we're healthy and we're living a long time and we're not living in a cave, and is through technological progress. And you and I have enjoyed that in our lifetime. And then all of a sudden you hit sort of 50 or 60 or something, and you say, oh, now let's stop all technological progress for the kids, because we think everybody's got enough now, right?
But I think
so it doesn't work like that.
But it's the
right?
no. Listen, I think we're in danger of agreeing. I do agree with you, and that's why I talk about people, planet, and progress, because I am an innovator at heart, like you're right. Science, technology, we have to advance, but the balance sheet has to net out, doesn't it? We can't just keep doing things to the detriment of the environment. Yeah. So whilst the balance sheet is working in our favour, that's goodness. I worry a little bit about wastage. I think your point
Yeah.
about litter is huge and it's everywhere in the country, but this kind of endless upgrade cycles for no need really whatsoever, other than perhaps somebody just getting a new product out there and new revenue streams. That's just lining pockets as opposed to actually genuine progress and making a difference.
Well, it depends on rational decision making, right? Because if there's an economic advantage to having a newer thing rather than an older thing, like if you take like the airline industry, like the low cost airline airlines have the most modern equipment. Like, why is that? Like, you'd expect they'd have the oldest, crappiest equipment, but it's because there's an they have such an operationally efficient model. They can't afford any downtime, so they can't afford anything to break down. So there's an economic rationale for them. Those aircraft are sold on to other airlines that maybe have a different operating model. But
Mm.
you look at like compute, and you talked a lot about upgrades and tech debt, and the compute cycles. But is that technology economic? Does it have any economic value? And it might be that 10-year-old computers. I've got a I think about probably 10-year-old server in my basement that's running. I've got a GPU farm sitting in my basement, and the uh, it's like a 10-year-old server. That's not the bottleneck. Running a bunch of NVIDIA RTX 3090 GPUs, and that's a great reuse of the technology. The problem is it consumes a vast amount of electricity. It's running
Yeah.
like these old Xeon processors that are like 750 watts each or something. So, right, when you talk about sustainability, energy efficiency is like a big part of that equation for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's like if I have to consume more electricity to run this old piece of technology that's, I don't know, generated from somewhere that's maybe spewing emissions out, well, is it environmentally kinder to throw the old tech away? I don't know. Right?
Yeah. I'd try to get the data as to if you were to buy something new, what would the kind of like overhead have been of doing that?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting discussion. We're running short of time now. I think it's been a brilliant discussion. There's a couple of things I want to close on. Go back to music. You can get your guitar out here. When work's getting a bit heavy, what do you reach for? What's on your playlist?
Well, with music, um,
I know you've got a guitar there in the background.
that was
In
my
fact,
Christmas present.
talk to me about your re-release of your old single.
Oh no! Well, this was funny. It was yeah. We were talking
Can
about
you
this
hear me
earlier.
playing a bit of music in the background here?
Yeah, no, you can't because you've got you've got
The
like
muffler on.
the background noise elimination turned on Zoom. No, it's like I was talking to an old buddy of mine that was in a band I was in like 40 years ago, and we got some old tapes and kind of used AI to clean them up, and signed up with DistroKid, like the music distribution platform, and we just put a couple of tracks out, and so we're all the big music platforms. I think I've earned like I don't know, like $47 or something. So it's not going to make me rich, but it was fun. It was fun to be able to get in the Tesla and like press the little microphone button and say, it's a terrible name for my band actually. It was called Wilco and the Spitfire Pilots. I don't know where we got that from.
And what was the genre? Come on, give me.
It's just punk. It's like pop punk. And I could say, play Welcome to the Spitfire Pilots and Apple Music. It comes on, it plays in the car, and my kids are like, "Oh God, no, that's not that again."
Dad, final question. Cheese. So, what's in your fridge? What was on your Christmas Day cheese board, and what's left in the fridge now?
Oh God. Well, Stilton's usually the thing that's left, and
It's always
I
Stilton.
think the Stilton ended up in the. I had My wife won't listen to this podcast, thank goodness, because I will confess that the Brussels sprouts and Stilton soup that she made me last night was one of the more unusual January Christmas leftover meals I've ever had, because it is what is it? It's like the 7th of January now, something, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's like, so we're we're heading to that point where the Brussels we're starting to look a little bit tired,
So you can
So
just, but you can still bung them in a soup.
there's puy. I like those soft ones. There's a bit of puy. What is it? A puy d'anglais or something? I can't remember the name of it. Yeah, but yeah, the Stilton and the Brussels sprouts went in the soup last night.
So I just want to finish on, you are doing your bit for the environment and sustainability here by eating everything that's in the fridge as opposed to
Exactly.
just throwing more waste away. So you are an advocate for sustainability in
I
that.
never throw anything away. It's like I've turned into my parents. Like my kids come back for Christmas, they're all adults now. And the first thing they do is they go through like the larder and everything else, like, oh dad, oh my God, this is 3 years old. Like, why have you still got that? It's like, no, don't throw it. It's just developing a flavor.
It'll be kimchi before you know it. It's
Yeah.
fermenting.
Oh,
James, listen, I know you're really busy. It's been brilliant. I love the story from, I didn't know you were an economist at university, through your rigging days, your music days, your Disney days, and I keep doing that. Whenever I think of Disney, I always put my hands up to music, and then large corporate. And I think you're actually one of a small number of people that have done client side and supply side work in industry.
yeah.
I would
I
attest.
my, I mean my advice, if you get for anybody, or yeah, kind of any stage in their career, is um you have to be able to look at things from 360-degree perspective. You have to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. I'd always recommend, like, spend some time on the client side, spend some time on the supplier side, go spend some time in procurement. Procurement's a great place to learn a whole load of stuff, like, how business really gets done. Do an operations job, do a strategy job, and because you could have more than one string to your bow. And the other thing that I found was, if you work in one place in one job, like your whole career, you end up not really knowing anybody other than, like, your network becomes quite small. One of the advantages, I think, of my career, and I've worked in a few different firms in a few different roles, is that I always know somebody that can fix a problem. So
Mm,
people say, like, oh, we need somebody to come help us with this big project that we've just signed in Denmark or in Germany, or, and this, other industry sector out in California or something. And I say, yeah, I know a guy that can do that. Right.
mm.
And that has value in its own right. Just knowing people that can help you, whether they're suppliers or whether they're people you can hire or people you can just call to help. And I there are a great many people that I've met in my career. And you're one of them. I just kind of I stayed in touch with. I love talking to, and if ever I'm stuck, like really stuck, like I've got a problem I can't solve, or
Mm.
maybe I need a job or something, just being able to pick up the phone or WhatsApp these days and say, "Hey, buddy, can you help?" 95% of people will come straight back to you. Yeah, how can I help? So
Yeah.
building a network and, like, not being a dick is, like, super important, right?
And on that note, James, brilliant. Thanks very much. Listen, I hope you have a brilliant 2026, and we'll catch up soon.
Well, thanks for having me on. Yeah, good to see you, man.
Cheers, man.